Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining our webinar on modernising your membership body while also avoiding project failure. My name is Alan Reed. I'm Director of Client Projects with Hart Square. I'm delighted to welcome our panel today, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, please. So we have Alistair McCaffrey and Gordon Brewster. Alistair, do you mind just introducing yourselves and a few words about the CIPR, please?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name's Alistair McCaffrey. I'm the Chief Executive of the Chartered Institute of Public Relations. I've been Chief Executive for 7 years, and one of the things that I wanted to do when I first came into my post was to undertake a big IT project to modernise all our infrastructure. And it took 6 years of thinking and preparation to be ready for it, and we completed it successfully at the end of last year.
Great, thank you very much, Alistair. Gordon, do you mind?
Sure, thank you, Alan. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gordon Brewster, and I'm Head of Sales and Customer Management at Ifinity. Ifinity are one of the leading vendors to not-for-profit organisations for technology services and technology provisions. And I'll say a little bit more about that when we get to my part of the presentation. Thank you, Alan.
Great. Thank you very much, Gordon, Alistair. Okay, so let's rattle through. So first of all, webinar etiquette. The session will be recorded. That doesn't apply. It doesn't affect any of your data unless you ask something in the Q&A box, in which case that will be part of the recording. So there is a Q&A box for you to be able to ask questions to the panel. And they will be tackled at the end, please. So please make use of that as we go. There's also a box for putting in chat, and if you have any technical issues, please put it in there, and then one of my colleagues will try and assist you with that. And then generally, this is just for the panel. If you're not speaking, please go on mute, just for continuity. Great, thank you. At Hart Square, we deliver projects to the not-for-profit sector. The only point I'll make is that we're religiously, fiercely independent of any technology or provider, which helps us to advise and run technology partner selections across the entire marketplace. So the agenda today, we're racing along. We've done the first one. And then I'd like to briefly set out the challenges that we hear about as we deliver projects to the membership and wider not-for-profit space. Then I'll interview Alistair, if I may, and then we'd like to hear from Gordon in terms of responding to the challenges that Ifinity are seeing in the marketplace as well. And finally, we'd like to set aside a good chunk of time for Q&A from delegates who are considering their own projects or have issues in their own organizations, and then you might benefit from the insight from Alistair or from Gordon. Great. So first of all, in terms of the challenges that we're seeing in the membership space and the wider not-for-profit space, so one of the things that Hart Square does a lot, we do a lot of research studies and we do a lot of surveys. So we carried out a survey targeted specifically at membership bodies. And the question we were asking them was, do you feel that you're keeping up with member expectations? And if you're the leader of a not-for-profit organization and as a membership body, your job in some ways is to feel a bit anxious about that. There should be a natural tension about that. Things change. So the responses we got back were a little bit more nervous than we expected. So over 60%, as you can see here, felt that they were not keeping up with member expectations. Now, a large chunk of the context for that is that there's a strong feeling that we're all modern digital consumers now in every other aspect of our lives. When we do engage with a supplier of any kind, we expect to be treated in a personalized way. We expect things to be context sensitive. And a lot of membership organizations are struggling to keep up with that and are struggling to meet those kind of expectations. A really high number said that they didn't have a single view of the truth or 360-degree view, or basically one place where they could put all of their knowledge about members and potential members and other stakeholders. Now, the reason that is relevant and a little bit terrifying is that from a lot of years of delivering projects and a lot of research, that having a single view of the truth is one of the most enabling things that a membership organization can have. And it's one of the most hindering things if the organization doesn't have it. In brief, for instance, if part of your data is held over here and part of it's held over there, it's extremely difficult to manage the relationship online. The website then doesn't have access to the latest information about the person and can't really allow the person to manage that relationship or data and updates online. Similarly, we find it's very disabling for your staff who can't ask questions like, give me a list of people who bought this last year, whether it's an event attendance or something else, and who clicked on the email we sent out a few days ago to read more about our current event. Because it's in different places, they can't ask those questions. The initiative never takes place. So that's a startling proportion who are not able to do those kind of things. Over 60% said they still felt that their own communications were generic. Dear Bob or Dear Sarah was the extent of the personalization, and then everything else after that was one size fits all, everyone gets the same stuff, with commensurately and unsurprising lack of take-up and lack of response to those communications. And then finally, we've asked questions about how are membership organizations coping with the difficulty in having in-person events, in-person conferences, the annual conference, small audience events. And over 70% of the organizations that we asked that question said that today they were really struggling to have any replacement or any strategy that replaced one of the major planks of membership value, which is in-person events. So that's something we want to uncover a bit more today and talk about how some organizations are tackling that problem. So a very strong thread that membership bodies feel that they're struggling to keep up with what members are expecting, and therefore worried that competitors will have it away on their toes with their members, or members will simply not feel the value and will not renew. So we try to visualize that a little bit. Let's meet our member or potential member. What we're hearing is that this person is that profile that we talked about. She's used to a certain level of service, even where what she's buying is incredibly cheap and the relationship is incredibly ephemeral. She's still used to being treated personally and using all of the data that's been generated. She's extremely busy. So whilst we within the membership world feel that everything we do is important and valuable, getting her attention to value any of that is increasingly difficult, and therefore we must serve it up in a way that makes it as easy as possible for her to engage with it, and of course in as personalized and relevant a way as possible. She also, so in the old days in the membership world, you were the main source of information, the main source of support, of comradeship, of family with other like-minded members. Those days are gone. And essentially people know how to provide, get themselves information and networks without having to pay membership fees for it anymore. So membership organizations are having to respond to that challenge, and it's an increasing concern. One of the challenges we see is that members are tending to be bombarded with disconnected information, none of it building up a whole profile of personalization and relevance. On the other hand, the fact that there are all of these touch points with the member and potential member is a huge area of opportunity as well, if done better. So the summary that we found was that membership organizations do feel that this member is actually at risk, but there's a strong recognition that by the appropriate change, there's more opportunity than ever to prove the value to this person and to maintain the longevity and loyalty of this person as well. So what I'd like to do is to hear from the people in on the webinar how this is affecting them, and what changes people are seeing in their own organizations. So could I please ask if people can take part in a poll, please? So I'm just going to launch the poll. Here we go. And this is a poll about major projects that you might be considering. So it's multiple choice. So please feel free. It's anonymous. Answer what questions you might be considering within your own organization and what changes. And if there are multiples, please indicate that. And I'll give it a few more seconds for polling, and then I'll share the results. Okay. Okay. So the results on here are actually a solid half of the people on the webinar are considering a major CRM project. And CRM, just means all of your back office, all of the stuff that your colleagues on the payroll essentially use to drive member communications and manage transactions. And it can be including exam systems and grant systems and membership systems. All of that comes under the heading of CRM. Websites and website integration improvement. Almost 70% are feeling that there's a problem there and need to invest in tackling that. And then some significant numbers in smaller areas. So that's very, very interesting. Okay, great. So let me stop that and then move on. Thank you very much for the responses there. So I'd like to introduce Alistair back in, if I may. And Alistair, if I could ask you, do you mind just opening up and talking a little bit about what CIPR does and the kind of things that your members value from you, please?
Yeah, we're the professional body for people who work in public relations. We have a fairly usual mix of services for our members: advice, legal helplines, online networks, face-to-face local groups. We organise conferences. We provide qualifications, and we also provide training. So I think probably most of the things that most professional bodies would do. And our members interact with us on a mix of those things, depending on their situation and their needs. And we suffered really exactly the scenario that you described, where there was a lot of interaction going on, but on separate platforms. There was no single view of the member. So we could not in one place see what a member had done over the last 2 years and, not try to sell them the thing they just bought 2 weeks ago, or try to sell them something that we just introduced that might be relevant to them. And I suppose the best example of the problems that led to was the fact that we used Eventbrite for all our bookings, which is a great platform, very easy for volunteers to use. As a matter of policy, we always offer a discount rate to our members booking for events. Yeah. But of course, when they book on Eventbrite, we have no way of knowing who's entitled to that discount or not. So we just kind of take it on trust, really, that everybody who claimed that discount was entitled to it. And there were multiple things of that sort across the whole IT environment, where there were inconsistencies and gaps and just not really servicing people as they expected to be. So
that essentially formed the drivers for change when you first took over leadership of CIPR. Do you feel that there was a bottom line element to that you were losing membership and revenue from those kind of problems?
I wouldn't put it that strongly. I think that one of the things was my members are quite tech savvy and quite adept at using new technology. So they're quite aware of what is out there. Many of them work for large organizations that have invested huge amounts of money in solving these problems. And so they just increasingly look to us as being, well, archaic. Why haven't you sorted this out, kind of thing? So there was a sense that we were falling behind their expectations and just looking a bit fuddy-duddy. But I mean, I can't say that it actually led to loss of revenue or anything of that sort. But I think it did contribute to a feeling that we were really a bit behind the times, and probably made us a bit harder to take seriously.
Yes, and I guess you could say there's an associated risk with that, even if you tackled it before it actually materialized.
Yeah.
And then, can I ask you, in terms of practicalities, the technology projects you've undertaken, they cost money, they're hassle. You've got your colleagues have a day job to do. How did you go about? So you talked about the problems you were trying to solve.
Yes.
How did you go about getting agreement within the organization and with whichever dusty group of people controls the money, trustees or finance committee, etc., on what kind of change was required, how much money you wanted to devote to that, how much resource, and the benefits. So one of the major problems is people struggle to initiate projects and get agreement. How did you go about that at CIPR?
Okay. Well, in terms of the senior management team and the rest of the staff at the CIPR, it wasn't difficult at all because they carried the burden of trying to rig these different pieces of IT kit together. They carried the burden of manually re-entering data from one thing into another, extracting Excel reports, trying to push that from one system into another. So they're fed up with all of that. They thought it was a huge waste of time. They were very happy to look for ways out of that. Everybody involved in marketing and selling was frustrated that they didn't understand their customer as well as they knew they ought to. We couldn't target our marketing more specifically. So right across the organization, people felt the frustrations of working with a system that we had. I mean, our main CRM we'd installed in 2004. We'd been running it for 15 years, so it was really well behind the time. So there wasn't any question. There wasn't any kind of advocacy at all for the status quo. People saying, no, we must stay with this, and we like it how it is. Absolutely none. In terms of the board, their perspective was slightly different, but they would often ask me questions like, well, don't we have data on this, and don't we have data on that? I go, no. I mean, you may not realize that for most of our members, the only data that we really hold in any reliable way is what's their postal address and when did they join, when did they last renew. All the other stuff, their characteristics, what they like, what they've been involved in. I mean, you can find on an individual basis with an awful lot of drilling down, but all that has to be compiled manually. It doesn't exist as a kind of sort of regular management function of the system. So they were increasingly, I think, frustrated that we couldn't deliver what you would get from having a single view of the customer. So again, there was no weddedness to the existing status quo at all. So nobody was saying, no, let's not change. The only question was, when are we ready and when will we have enough money? So
so that's the question, isn't it? It's going to get surprisingly high. If people haven't changed their system since 2004, they're not in the habit, boards are not in the habit of spending very large sums of money on projects. So it's getting them to understand that and getting them to support it is the management challenge typically.
Well, I think I've been very lucky in this respect because certainly, my earlier conversations with you and your colleagues and conversations with Ifinity and everybody else we spoke to was like, oh, how are you going to get past this past your board? It's like, that just wasn't an issue for us at all because all the board wanted was to be assured that the process of finding a supplier had been done thoroughly and we got the right answer. I mean, obviously they didn't want to spend £500,000 because you haven't got £500,000. So we had to come up with some rough financial benchmarks and then say within that, go out and find what the best answer is. And if the best answer is something that's too expensive to afford in one go, maybe we'll have to look at extending this project for longer. But I didn't have to sell this internally at all.
Great. Okay, a lot of organizations we find, and sometimes we assist with this as well. There is a strong blue bottle against the window saying year after year of struggling to get clarity on costs and alignment. And then a trustee leaves and you start again. Great. So in an early step for CIPR, and obviously you were strongly involved in driving this project forward, was the search for technology partners you've mentioned. And of course, the world had changed a lot since you put in your previous system. How did you go about it? How did you bring people along with the process? How did you select your partner? What did you think was important about that process, if you wouldn't mind, please?
Well, we did. So our main constraint was we didn't have the money to undertake this project for a number of years. But we knew we had to think about it. And as you say, we were so out of date, we didn't really know what was possible nowadays. So we got various staff members to go out over a period of years and just attend briefings, talk to vendors, go out to exhibitions and just see what's there, look at what could be done, because we needed to sort of reimagine ourselves as an organization and think, well, if, would this feature be useful to us? How would we manage our awards, assuming we could do this? Or how would we go about setting up our training sessions differently if we could do that? So we sort of tried to create a general awareness of what was out in the market, and think about how that would help us. We did a bit of organizational change thinking as well about what kind of organization we saw ourselves as being. We also put a lot of time into mercilessly simplifying our processes so that they were ready to be automated. And I'm sure that Gordon is chuckling quietly with his microphone muted, because from his point of view, we weren't anything like ready. But I mean, membership organisations have a cultural habit of complicating everything, and we just went systematically around the organisation, simplifying everything down as far as we could. When it got to the point we were ready to proceed to vendor selection, we knew we couldn't do that on our own. So we came to Hart Square. We had some conversations about the sorts of things we wanted to do and our objectives. And I mean, the first big time saver was the fact that we relied on Hart Square to produce a shortlist for us and say, given what you've told us, what you want to do, and the kind of money that you're probably able to spend, we think that you should look at these 5 or 6 people, because that's roughly the right kind of area. And then we spent about a month talking to each of those vendors. They came in, they talked to everybody, and we went through a process that involved all the staff before we finally chose Ifinity.
And can I ask, so 2 things with that. You said involved all the staff, which we think is a fundamentally really important thing. And then the second thing, what were the factors, apart from affordability? You've mentioned that more than once, but that's important for most of the delegates on the webinar. Apart from affordability, what were you really looking for from your technology partner?
The creation of a single member environment. So we decided that we wanted to go for something where there was a single platform that both had the CRM and the website, because we were tired of rigging up through an API connections between the CRM and the website. And so that was one of the things that initially we were sort of I think Ifinity was quite high, or IMIS was quite high on our list of likely choices before we started, because it obviously delivered that.
Great, thank you. And then, so you've already mentioned you've gone live with the project, so that puts you in the success column right away. Can you tell us about how you arranged your colleagues at CIPR to manage the project? Because that's one of the major risk areas. The major risk areas are not typically that the supplier fails. It's that the client underestimates the amount of work, loads it onto the day job, and everything drifts. So how did you arrange yourselves, please, and how did that work out for you?
Well, we having decided we were going to do this in 2019, we stripped down the work plan for the whole organisation quite considerably. So we allowed time right across the organisation to do this. I assigned one of my SMT to project manage it. She had a few other things to do, but essentially that was her full-time job for the year. And I think I allowed up to half of my time for this.
Which is something that most organizations struggle to do, to allocate senior management time to these kind of projects.
Well, we knew we had a year to do it in. We had to get it done that year. It was important, and therefore other stuff wasn't. So we did just push other stuff aside that we could perfectly well have been doing, and just not do it. One of the challenges was, so we didn't really allow enough time, as everyone told us. There were some advantages in not having enough time, actually, because we couldn't witter. So we just had at the end of each sprint, we just had to say, dump it, forget it, drop it, move on. So we didn't have the luxury of saying, let's spend 2 weeks thinking about whether we really need to do this. No, just forget it. We'll come back later. But even on that very compressed time, because each team was taking it in different sprints, we started off with events, and I think they went in April. Finance went in November, but by the time we were all ready to go, I think the events team hadn't kind of tested anything for months and months. So they were sort of, even within that period of time, there was a job to kind of, everyone had done their bit and then gone back to the day job. So to get everybody back together again at the end was quite a challenge.
Great, thank you. And by the way, for everyone, if you have questions for Alistair about his project, please drop it into the Q&A box and we'll tackle those at the end. So based on what you've gone through at the organisation, so the project was ultimately a success. Obviously, no project feels like a success in the middle of it because it's always loads of work and tackling things going on. Can you think of a significant project issue that needed tackling, and how did you go about tackling it, please?
There were two really that came up. One was about developer hours, where after we'd signed the contract, there was a kind of an updating of the estimated number of developer hours that we would need to take in order to deliver it, and that estimate was considerably higher than the price that we'd originally been quoted, and so that took some discussion. And what we did, we whittled it down. We found there were some things in the spec where staff members had just inserted things that were not in our brief, so we just took them out, so we're not doing them. There were other things that were in our brief, but now that they'd really sort of come to the light of day, we thought, well, if it's really going to be that expensive and complicated to implement, let's drop it. So we dropped some of those things. Then we had a discussion about, okay, how many of these things actually have to be done by an iFinity developer? How many could we do ourselves? So we reduced that down. And on the rest, we were just left with probably a 10% level of uncertainty about, well, until they actually started doing the task, it was very difficult to know whether it was going to be half a day or a day and a half type thing.
Yeah.
And we accepted that. So we sort of negotiated that down. And something I forgot to mention in answer to your previous question was that, as well as having Hart Square help us with the vendor selection, we also had Hart Square support us in setting up the project, because although we had, we believed, enough management time to commit to the project, we didn't have the experience. So the senior management team member who I said basically this was her job for the year had never run a project like this before at all. So it was very important for us to have the support of Hart Square in setting all that project up with all the milestones and parameters and templates and everything. And we also had somebody, we had a consultant from Hart Square come in and check in with us regularly. And so that was very helpful and very useful to us in the negotiation that I've just described. The only other thing that was an issue was in about 6 months in, we began to have hiccups in the development of the website. And there were all sorts of different complications with that, but that culminated in the web developer actually going off sick for an extended period of time. So we had to rely on iFinity bringing in some backup of somebody else to kind of work at triple speed to make up the time.
Yeah.
So that was actually really hard in terms of meeting our objectives, and we had people working absolutely insane hours to catch up with that, but we managed it in the end.
That sounds stressful indeed. And then just a final question for you, Alistair, please.
Yeah.
And there are some things popping into the Q&A for you, I can see already. If you were advising a previous version of yourself, and we saw on the survey, a lot of people are about to embark in this kind of CRM project, and CRM projects always involve a website element now, of course. What would you advise someone in your position to be mindful of as part of starting out? What are the hard-won lessons, please?
Well, everything is more complicated than you think. I mean, I tend to think everything's terribly simple and can be done in half an hour, and I'm constantly being proven wrong about that. But I just think you have to be very, very clear about what you need this for, and don't allow yourself to be distracted by whims, special pleading, this team or that team insisting they must have this, that, and the other. You've got to really, really interrogate your colleagues hard about what they need and why they need it, and keep everything to a minimum. Because I think one of the things I learned from the process was the IT consultants term minimum viable product. I hadn't heard that before, so that was a good way to pitch our thinking. We want to go live with something that's a minimum viable product, and there'll be other things. We'll be tidying up and development work we need to do after that. But we don't have to have everything absolutely perfect and polished before it goes live. We have to be able to do, we have to be able to set up direct debits. We have to be able to renew memberships. We have to be able to take bookings. The other stuff we'll learn on the job.
Yes, thank you very much. So that's really helpful and insightful. Great, thank you very much. And Alistair, I'm going to ask you very kindly, can you stay on, please, because we have some Q&A questions for you coming up as well. And then I'm just going to hand over to Gordon to respond to some of the points about how membership organisations can modernise and what you're seeing in the sector. Gordon, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alan. Alan's going to help me fly the PowerPoint at his end, so thank you for that, Alan, and I'll give you a nudge when we need to move on to the next slide. So by way of introduction in terms of Ifinity and who we are, as an organisation, we've been in existence since 1994 with an exclusive focus of delivering innovative technology solutions and services to the not-for-profit sector. And all shapes, sizes, colours, variants and so on of not-for-profit organisations are served by ourselves. Trade bodies, professional bodies, exactly like CIPR that you've been hearing about and so on. Our exclusive focus is on a technology called IMIS from Advanced Solutions International, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment or two. And here in the UK, we are the premier authorised ASI partner. We're based in London, and from our base in London, we service clients in the geographical regions that you can see here on this particular slide, predominantly within the United Kingdom and in Europe. And last year was a very good year for Ifinity. We received significant recognition for our project successes and so on by Advanced Solutions International, and you can see some of the awards on the right-hand side of this slide. Our aim and objective at Ifinity is to deliver complete service and to deliver ongoing account management. We firmly believe that very strong ongoing account management and a very strong relationship and partnership with an organisation, with our client organisations, is key to avoiding project failure. It's very easy to go, well, it's maybe not necessarily very easy to go live with the project following an implementation, but project failure can happen at any point, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road, and so on. And we have a strong relationship to support that. In terms of what we do, our exclusive focus is on IMIS. It's IMIS is based on Microsoft technology. It's developed using Microsoft tools, SQL.NET, and so on. And we service clients of all sizes. We've got some very, very small clients and indeed some very, very large clients. And again, we provide an end-to-end service and total package to support their requirements, because with the best will in the world, nobody knows what's around the corner, nobody knows what's coming down the tracks, and we need to be there to support our clients. IMIS as a technology can be tailored, configured to meet the precise requirements of your organisation, because with the best will in the world, every organisation has unique and specific requirements. There will be some core requirements, but around the edges, you do have specific needs. Next slide, Alan. In terms of Advanced Solutions International, they're the manufacturers and developers of IMIS. They were founded in 1991, and they are now a global organisation. And this slide here, over towards the left, you can see the estimate is that globally there are 40,000 individuals exactly like you using IMIS every day to service their organisation's strategy, objectives, requirements, operational needs. And in turn, the estimate is they're supporting 50 million members in all shapes and sizes of different types of organisations. And we reckon that IMIS is now being used in well over 20 countries around the world. ASI are the exclusive developers of IMIS, and they have a total focus on the not-for-profit sector as well. And you can see some metrics here in terms of staff numbers, turnover, and the amount of R&D dollars that ASI are spending on IMIS exclusively to advance it for the benefit of the client base and the community. Next slide, Alan. What I thought it would be useful to do is to focus a little bit in on what is on Ifinity's desks right now. We're involved in an awful lot of procurement exercises. We're involved with a lot of client organizations. And I thought it would be useful just to share with you some of the issues that we see developing and emerging right now. And I'm going to talk a little bit about events and membership expectations. Alan referenced earlier on one of the slides, and he gave a statistic out that 70% of organizations have no replacement for in-person conferences. And I want to talk about what we're doing with one of our clients at the present time. I also want to move on and have a look at income diversification. What we've noticed with a lot of clients, prospective clients, and indeed clients, is that with the COVID situation, there has been a real difficulty for many clients whereby event income has completely dropped off, and they're scrambling around trying to find other sources of income, trying to identify ways of shoring up income as opposed to relying completely on their membership fees and subscriptions. And particularly want to have a look at here what I refer to as a DAM strategy. And what I mean by DAM is that's digital asset management. That's something that you've not come across before. And then finally, I'm going to talk about maintaining relevance, future-proofing, and avoiding obsolescence, because with the best will of the world, you can't get everything right at the outset. And Alistair talked a little bit about that in terms of minimal viable product and so on. We're a great believer in that. And you have to maintain flexibility for the future, because who knows what will happen, because that can be a big source of project failure. Final point I won't get much of an opportunity to talk about at all is learning management systems. We're getting constant inquiries now from many organizations or clients about using learning management systems, again, to try and diversify income. If anybody wants to talk to me separately about that, I'm more than happy to do that. So, virtual conferences. We're supporting one of our clients at the present time using this technology. It's called VirtWay, and this, in our view and in our experience, leapfrogs anything else that we've seen, and certainly I hope that you've seen. We certainly regard this as a game changer. I've got no doubt many of you have sat in on virtual conferences, maybe using Zoom and technologies like that. And Zoom's fine, I think, for a quick hour session such as this, maybe a little bit longer. But where you're sat maybe for a full conference over a couple of days, it can be very tiring and it's not very engaging. And the client that we've got and that we're working with has taken a completely different approach, very modern, very forward-looking, and they're using the VirtWay technology, and it's a 3D immersive experience. And I think traditional places have their place, but now client expectations, particularly among younger members of the future for your organizations, are looking for these different types of technology, and they may well have been exposed to that within their own environment. I think it creates excitement, engagement, and enthusiasm. And one of the key things about it is that it's an open-ended, non-linear conference experience. And if any of you have played GTA, Grand Theft Auto, or the RDR, Red Dead Redemption video games and so on, it's very like that, and the technology is built on gaming platforms. Next slide. So just having a look at VirtWay, if you Google VirtWay, you will be taken to the homepage of VirtWay, and you can find out an awful lot about it. I'm not in a position to show this, but if you were to go to the homepage and scroll down, there's an excellent introductory video that you can find, and I would encourage you to all have a look at that. Next slide, Alan. So this is a screen grab of a phrase from the VirtWay website. I'm just going to grab a little bit of tea while you have an opportunity to look at that. And this is the VirtWay proposition, that they're the only virtual 3D platform of connecting 500 people in the same room at their own time. It's avatar based and so on. And one of the key things that our client is doing here is to use VirtWay, and they've got several thousand people registered for their main annual conference. So conference numbers seem to have actually gone up as a result of that. Next slide, Alan. So looking at just some examples of screenshots of the VirtWay environment. Here what we can see is maybe a conference session. It may well be a small breakout session whereby we've got the presenter over on the left-hand side, the right-hand side of this slide, and an audience who are listening in. When an audience listens into a presenter in this type of format, they are exclusively listening to the presenter. They're not caught up with the hubbub and background noise of the conference and so on. And they can actually see, you can't see this very well, but towards the top of the screen, you'll see a kind of black triangle. That would be the screen where the audience are in a position to follow the presentation. Next slide, Alan. Next example is a seminar room, and you can see here my avatar in the seminar room. I'm in a position to move the avatar around using the controls over on the lower right-hand side of the screen. I can go into the seminar room, I can take a seat, and I can follow the presentation and listen to the conference and so on. You can see that there's a restricted number of seats, maybe for this particular breakout session, small seminar room. Next slide, Alan. What we've got here is a large conference auditorium. Again, you can see the conference screens and so on. The presenter would come down. It's a little bit difficult to see, but in the center of the auditorium, you can see where the presenter would stand at the lectern, deliver the presentation. And as an audience member, you can come in, you can take a seat, you can raise your hand, you can ask questions, and you can interact in a Q&A type way, but you can follow the full conference experience and so on. And over towards the left, you can see that you can integrate with social media as well. So you've got the full experience. Next slide, Alan. Here we can see a trade exhibition. Within a particular conference here, we can see two individuals who are having a conversation with each other. You can see the actual trade booth, and you can have interactive displays and everything within the trade booth. And you can see around the trade area, other exhibitions, booths, and so on. And certainly our client has found that exhibition revenue has held up remarkably strongly with this. And from an exhibitor's point of view, it's a very, very attractive approach because exhibitors can interact very easily and directly with conference attendees. They can send them private messages. So if you have an exhibition and you have exhibitors can actually send private messages to Gordon Brewster, who I really want to have a chat to. They can do that privately because often at an exhibition, it can be very difficult. At a conference, it can be very difficult for two people to connect together. Virtway makes that straightforward. Next slide, Alan. Another example, this might be a coffee break, a social group of people coming together. They can interact, have a bit of a chit chat about the conference and how things are going. It's a private conversation, so only those that are there can do that. In the background of this slide, you can maybe see little stools and tables and so on. What you can do is put onto those tables interactive PCs and virtual laptops, so conference delegates can go to those, engage and use those laptops and tablets and so on to get access to conference materials in real time, making it a very immersive experience, and delegates are free to wander around. So in my view, the genie is out in terms of virtual conferences. I don't think we're going to go back to how things used to be. I think that we are in a new world now, and virtual conferences are here to stay. Certainly, there will be a necessity to come together physically, but I think for those organizations who need to look at this, Virtway offers a viable option. Profit seems to hold up in terms of revenue, in terms of delegate numbers, in terms of exhibition revenue and booths and so on. I think one of the other things that often shocks me about conferences, I've been to so many of those in my lifetime, I'm increasingly shocked at just the environmental impact, the food waste that goes on in some of the conferences. And I think particularly for younger members, they're going to maybe consider that much more so. So I think there's a perception issue here as well in terms of how you're regarded. And that's maybe something that you want to think about. Next slide, Al. Other aspect I want to talk about, dam strategy. This is a slide I used a number of years ago at a conference where I set out an argument that the most valuable resource that you have as a not-for-profit organization is the data that you hold. And I still firmly believe that. And that view has been strengthened in light of the work that we're doing with two clients around development of a dam strategy, digital asset management. Next slide, Alan. Thank you. So in terms of having a dam and a dam strategy, every organization here today will have digital assets, and organizations have an opportunity through a dam strategy to actually exploit those digital assets, to monetize them, and then generate revenue for your organization. And I'm not coming across many organizations that are doing that. I say we're working with two organizations to do this at the moment. To do this effectively, you do need to have a strategy though, because when you sit down and look at your assets, they'll be spread all over the organization. You can't search them, you can't provide them easily to your members and so on. Having a strategy and using a technology or a facility such as Asset Bank makes that easy. And you can also get access to analytics and so on. This is how the dam would look in terms of asset management. I think the experience here looks very kind of like Netflix almost. And I think people are familiar with that. It's easy to use. You can categorize the topics, make it easy to find and search, and so on. Next slide, Alan. Here we're actually looking at the setup of a particular asset. This could be a PowerPoint presentation, and we're looking at the system administrator view where you're setting up the asset. You need a little bit of curation skills around this so that you correctly tag it and so on, but that's not terribly difficult because you will be knowledgeable about your own assets and how they are tagged and how they need to be tagged to enable your members, supporters, and so on to find them easily. Next slide, Alan. You also get great analytics out of it. So who's using the dam, where are they going, what assets are they looking at, and so on. And that might allow you to shape and inform future strategies as well. Quite difficult getting that in any other formats. For example, if you just had a downloadable PDF on your website. Next slide, Alan. So in terms of the dam summary, I think every organisation has an opportunity to look seriously at this. It's an opportunity for diversified income, monetising assets that you've already got in place, and I think it's an engagement opportunity for your members. I think also there is a view that you can provide this on a subscription type basis because your members, especially younger ones, will be familiar with operating in a subscription way. It's subscription everything nowadays, from phones to Netflix to cars even, and so on. Everybody's familiar with that annual monthly payment, and I think that's a great opportunity for you. Think a little bit differently about how you might want to position this type of thing. And you can also integrate your DAM with your CRM in a straightforward way, and you can actually even access it as that client previously who's using Virtway is doing, integrate it with your virtual conference. Next slide. So avoiding project failure, I've noticed from a lot of engagements that we have been having recently that there's an increasing emphasis on applications that an organisation needs to integrate in and around their core CRM, and they're looking for system openness and they're looking for increased flexibility, because after all, who knows exactly what's around the corner? Who would have predicted last year at this time that we would be through a period of lockdown and this type of COVID situation? Nobody could have predicted that, and yet a lot of organisations now are scrambling around trying to set up online webinars, integrate with Zoom, integrate with GoToMeeting and GoToWebinar, and so on. Next slide, Alan. Thank you. And one of the technologies that's emerging, certainly on our desks, is a technology called Zapier. Many of you may well have heard of Zapier, and Zapier is a platform where there are thousands of apps available, everything from SurveyMonkey to MailChimp to Salesforce to whatever technology you can think about. And you can integrate using Zapier all of these different tasks or apps very, very easily. And this allows you to do the heavy lifting in terms of automating manual tasks so that you can concentrate on other activities, delivering and bringing about efficiencies. No coding, no programming or API developments. Those can be very, very expensive for you as an organization, but you can avoid that. Next slide. Thank you, Alan. So just a quick example in terms of IMIS, the client that in fact, we're working with a couple of clients on this at the moment. They have IMIS, they want to integrate with Zoom so that people can register for events and so on in IMIS. The event automatically is set up and configured in Zoom. Registrations are taken through our CRM IMIS. Those registrations pop across into Zoom. The blue arrows represent the Zapier connections and links here. In turn, Zoom can link out to Slack to notify individuals within the organization. And then at the end of the Zoom conference, you can initiate a SurveyMonkey survey to capture feedback and so on. Very simple, very straightforward, all low cost. Next slide, Alan. So in terms of avoiding project failure, you need to think about that carefully, dare I say it. And what I've also read about somewhere is that in the last 5 months, we've had 5 years worth of change. And I think it's important that you need that flexibility, because project failure doesn't just happen in year 1. It happens in year 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we're working with 3 organizations at the present time who coincidentally all have a leading technology platform and have been unable to implement it successfully. And we're helping them recover that situation and so on. And I think the Zapier approach gives you that flexibility. Next slide, Alan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gordon.
Sure. no problem.
That's great. And then I'd like to invite Alistair back on camera, if you could, please. And then I'm going to ask my colleague, Joyce. Joyce, do you mind if you could have a look at the Q&A box with a bunch of questions in there? And if you could read them out or channel them through, please.
Yeah, no problem. So the first question we have is for Alistair. So do you think an expensive, modern self-service website is an important part of delivering membership value?
I don't think it necessarily has to be expensive. And I think members do expect largely to self-service, and we want them to self-service. So I certainly think a website that is capable of supporting self-service is absolutely necessary, but I don't think that that means it has to be hugely expensive.
Great, thank you. And then next question then, please.
Yeah, this one for Gordon. Do you recommend a digital amnesty for staff or users to allow organisations to know what data is out there and how best to integrate it into the new system?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And a digital amnesty is a great way of presenting to the organisation when we embark on a project the opportunity for people to come forward and come forward with their spreadsheets and information. Invariably, if an organisation is using a legacy technology, staff within the organisation, not through any fault of their own, but because they've been tasked to deliver strategies and objectives, have had to find workarounds, ways of fulfilling the strategies that have been placed upon them by the senior leadership team. Often that involves spreadsheets. So often they'll have been squirreling away, doing their own little spreadsheets and so on. So a data amnesty is a great way of presenting that in an unthreatening way to staff.
Great, thank you. And then next question, please.
Yeah, for Alistair, has the service to members changed much in recent years?
It has, but not necessarily yet in ways that relate to the IT project. I mean, we went live on the middle of December last year. So there have been some changes. So, for example, we introduced in 2015 a quarterly membership magazine at a time when everyone was saying, well, magazines are dying and everyone's going digital. And it was enormously popular. It was really kind of won every award in the sector year after year. But we had to change that again just this year because it's now no longer affordable. So we've introduced things, taken them away again. We've concentrated a lot more on speaking up on behalf of the profession, advocacy, taking public positions on things, which doesn't require technology, but just requires us to be more aware of what's going on and able to respond faster. So I think we have changed what we offer members. The big emphasis at the moment, and not surprisingly in current circumstances, is on community. You know, this is one of our objectives is to build a sustainable community. And some of the more traditional things that a membership organisation is meant to be for, which are about mutual support, have really come to the fore this year. So people aren't asking for all kinds of whizzy technical things. It's really important for them to feel that they're part of a national organisation that understands their needs, is listening to them, and is ready to help them through whatever they face.
Absolutely. Great, thank you. And then next question, please.
Yeah, this is one for Gordon. Projects are getting more complex while budgets are reducing. How can we manage this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And with the best will in the world, not-for-profit organisations do not have limitless pockets and limitless budgets. The best way to go about that is to implement your project in a staged type way. Alistair referenced that particularly in his presentation and his discussion with Alan, whereby he talked about a minimal viable product. That's something that we emphasize nearly every time with all of our clients. In other words, what is the core requirement to get you live with your particular project? And thereafter, look to implement the other elements maybe in year 2, year 3, because with the best will in the world, you're going to be going on a journey when you implement your new technology and so on. And I also think there is a risk if you try and do too much too quickly, that you don't open yourself and expose yourself to the possibilities of the new technology. You need to allow the technology to begin to embed itself within your organization, give your staff an opportunity to find out how the technology could be used and what the future possibilities of the technology are. And by doing it in that staged way, it can allow you to develop your budgets to map in with that, and also maybe give your trustees or your governing council confidence and assurance that this is a success and this will pan out and deliver the results.
Can I just step in to agree with that very strongly? Because I think what I've seen in the way that some organisations specify and contract their IT is that they think that by packing as much as possible into the brief, they're getting best value. So what they do is they ram all kinds of things that are, you know, a mixture of absolutely essential, probably really important, and complete, you know, will o' the wisps, all gets packed in there. And they say, right, you know, how, you know, can you deliver all of this stuff? But actually, some of it just isn't that necessary. And you know, as Gordon says, once you've got the basics up, your whole perspective changes on what you need to do. Things that seemed hugely important a year ago don't seem less important now. Some of them, especially in you know, the speed of change this year, the things that we were trying to do last year, we just stopped doing this year altogether. It doesn't matter anymore, you know. So don't try to overspecify everything, and don't think that you're getting good value by pinning every last corner down with a supplier to make them do things that, you know, in 6 months' time or a year's time just may not be that important.
Yeah, two final points in that, Alistair. I refer to that on this side of the table as laundry lists, where people just throw everything in to the requirement. And so you end up, or we are on the receiving end of a giant laundry list. And what can happen thereafter, particularly if you don't focus in on the MVP, is you can end up in a situation that I refer to as postponed perfection. People look for everything to be delivered, everything needs to be right, as opposed to just taking a view on the MVP and going live with that and finding out the flip side of that is postponed perfection. We can't go live yet because this T hasn't been crossed or this I hasn't been dotted, and so on. So that would be two takeaways: avoid laundry lists and avoid the postponed perfection viewpoint, please.
Fantastic. No, those are really good insights. Thank you very much for that. Could I get the next question then, please?
Yes, one for Gordon. How many of your clients are now running virtual events?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is a rapidly evolving area. We've only got one client at the moment who is using that Virtway platform that I talked about. So that's quite exciting. That event will take place in September, and we're excited to see how that's going to pan out. A lot of our other clients are beginning to do things such as Zoom webinars, so transferring their learning and their educational processes online to use the likes of Zoom, use the likes of GoToWebinar, and I think of a few clients that have, in fact, one client has pivoted and transferred all of their events activities online and is now using GoToWebinar. So there's a little bit of a mix going on in terms of the technologies that are being used. So a number of our clients.
Great. I think we just got time for one more question then, please.
Yeah, and this was one for Alistair. Do you think you need to modernise to keep up, and how?
Yes, we do need to modernise to keep up. Not at the moment, primarily in the field of IT. I mean, I've been taking notes while Gordon's talking, because we were so, in a sense, we were so busy on resolving 2015's IT questions that, of course, all kinds of new things are now available that will probably be useful to us. So virtual conferencing looks absolutely fascinating. So we may want to talk about that in due course. So on the technology side, we're going to have a little pause because we need to sort of digest and get comfortable with the systems that we introduced 7 months ago. So I'm not planning any more technical changes. But yes, the whole way that the membership organisation functions and responds to member need absolutely has to change. But that's more to do with sort of operational behaviours, governance, and the roles of staff and volunteers. I mean, one of the things we've decided to do is we're going to go virtual. So we've abandoned our office. We've got a whole set of different challenges to face in terms of how we now function without any shared space whatsoever. What impact that will have on member services, we don't know yet. Nothing negative, I hope. It may free us up from some of our bad old habits.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, Gordon, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, in terms of that last point, Alistair, about being virtual, another one of our client organisations has decided to go virtual as well. I was having a conversation with the CEO there last week, and he's taken that decision as well. And I think one of the great points about going virtual as an organisation, in terms of staff recruitment, you have a much bigger opportunity to recruit staff throughout the UK. And dare I say it, you have an opportunity to maybe recruit staff, specialist areas and so on, individuals that might be based in the Western Isles of Scotland, and you could maybe recruit somebody at a much lower fee or salary than you otherwise would need to pay in the southeast of England, and get expertise in that way.
Absolutely. We're seeing a lot of change in that area. Thank you both very much for the Q&A session. And then there's just one more thing to talk about, which is that there is the famous Chase Live free leadership conference, which is happening in September this year. Now, this is very on topic because it's usually an in-person event for 1,000 or so not-for-profit leaders to attend and learn from each other, and also learn from technology experts about projects and what's current and what's coming. We've taken the opportunity to virtualize the whole event, reimagine all of the content, and it's being delivered in 3 mornings across the 8th and 10th to 10th of September. For anyone considering a project or for anyone who's looking at how to be the best and most enabled version of their own not-for-profit, please consider coming to the Chase live stream event. As I say, it is free, and it's got some of the best quality speakers and keynotes in the sector. We always get fantastic feedback about that. I'd like to finish by thanking Alistair and Gordon for your time and input and really valuable insights. Thank you both for that.
Sure.
And to thank everyone for attending the webinar and for all of your Q&A questions. So great. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks,
everyone. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.